Hi everyone, you're about to watch an interview with myself and Philip Kingsella. Now, Philip Kingsella brings together several theoretical applications concerning what the UFO phenomena may represent, and will also explore his own alien abduction, which occurred in the winter of 1989, and examining both old and new cases alike. Now, Philip draws upon several conclusions as to what we may be up against. Philip is both a clairvoyant medium and a UFO investigator and author. He also won the British Mediumship Award in Portsmouth, England, and he joins me today to discuss his abduction and so much more. Now, just a quick mention of my sponsor, Keen, who is a trusted network of talented spiritual advisors who are dedicated to empowering lives by helping people discover answers to their most pressing questions, gaining closure, finding purpose in life, and much more. So just use the link trykeen.com/Kevin or go to the description below to click the link. Now, just a quick side note, if you could support The Kevin Moore Show by using the donation email paypal@themooreshow.com, your support would mean the world in expanding my talk show. So this interview is 2 parts. So Philip, this is the second part. Thanks for joining me back. And my first question is regarding your latest book. What was your favorite 2 chapters to write in that book, or your favorite chapter?
Well, there are 2 really, if I want to be greedy. I mean, one of them was the incident at Devil's Den with Terry Lovelace, a brilliant man, a lovely guy. And, you know, when we had him come on our radio show and I read his book, I was fascinated by his event that occurred. And that is one of the stories, because, you know, he had also gone through a bout of missing time and abduction in the middle of a Devil's Den, as it were. Him and his mate had crossed over into a restricted territory and had subsequently been involved in an experience that got him in trouble with higher officials. The other one was with Earl Grey Anderson, who is a MUFON investigator, quite high up there. And his mother, the experience with his mother, who also had linked with the late Howard Hughes and was contracted by him as a secretary and had to do a lot of work for him. And the things that she explained to Earl, her son, of what she had been involved in was incredible. And then, of course, what happened to Earl with an event with these so-called Greys. And, you know, they're 2 of my favorites. There's also the Pascagoula event that Philip Mantle himself has, revived through a lot of digging and researching. Again, he's a brilliant researcher and author, investigator, as you know. And so, yeah, those 2 really stuck in my mind as quite terrifying, but also a reality to them both who experienced them.
And the Howard Hughes, I mean, just very, very briefly, I mean, what did she say that Howard had knowledge of?
Well, secret underground bases that Elle's mother had to go down, and finding out that there appeared to be some type of interest in not only extraterrestrial technology, but also that side of what we call psychic parapsychology. So it appeared that Howard Hughes had been contracted by other contractors, secret organizations. So we could see already that a lot of what we were, anticipating was very much in the fore, even going back all those years ago. So it's nothing new. And one of the things is that what we consider as science fiction is considered as science fact. It's just that in this world, we are given the toys. I think that those people at the top of the chain, whomever they are, probably have the real magic, and that we only see a tiny aspect of the magic that's going on. So everything that's given to the public are toys, basically. I'm sorry if I sound crude, but they are just mere toys. They're not intended to help us evolve in any way, and they have huge commercial value. But I think a lot of the real stuff, the hardcore stuff, would appear as magic, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, potentially even today. I mean, if they're still looking into this stuff,
Yes.
maybe that they've barely worked out just a few percentage of it. I mean, I
Yeah.
know there's whistleblowers that have come forward to say they've worked on reverse engineering crafts, but I take that with a pinch of salt. Because if you've signed the
Yes,
Secrecy
and
Act,
the other.
then you've signed it for life, and there's a reason why you don't. You
Yes.
either become the next Edward Snowden, or you keep your mouth shut.
Well, yes, there was another case of that occurring in the book. Don Siedenberg had contacted me, and we formed a close bond. He's an older man. He's passed over this year. He confided me with information that seemed to be linked with the Roswell crash in 1947. And subsequent to that, he had no involvement with the Roswell crash whatsoever, but had been, sent to Edwards Air Force Base in a private experiment. Because of his size, he was a very short man, and it involved a serum that he believed had created a remarkable change within his health and also would solve the problem to hunger on the planet. He was told that the serum had come from a container that had been involved with the Roswell craft. As unbelievable as that was, his records stood out because he sent them to me. A little bit of a tricky subject matter because it was fresh on the table. But he was a brilliant basketball player and a very fit gentleman, but that is also in the book. And as I said, the reader makes up their own mind, but I believed him. He had nothing to gain from lying.
Yeah, and it's a great book. I mean, I think one of the first cases you start with is the Roswell case, and you've
Oh,
you've tried
yes.
to add a little bit of a new spin on there by just speaking to the right people as well involved in it. I think you spoke to Donald Schmidt and a few others, and you've done a good job on that part. Yeah, well, it's all good, but yeah, I mean, I think the Roswell for me though is just that one that I can relate to a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I think this was the events in hand. Don Schmidt is the top researcher involved with Roswell. If any man knows, he will, because he's dug and he's dug and he's dug. So I think that we're dealing with an actual craft. I even argued, if this had been some type of secret military experiment, why the hell did the military not know about it? I mean, come on. You just have to ask the right questions. And you find that there are loops and contradictions within what the military establishment back then had been telling the people. And you'll find that it had been very frightening, or the leading up to the cover up had become very intimidating.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure other countries have had their own crash retrievals, but
Oh,
maybe
yes.
not as many as we would think there is, but it has happened, I'm sure.
Hmm.
So let's get to your story now, which is takes place in 1989. And in 1989, roughly how old were you?
20 years of
Okay.
age.
And you'd had other sightings with your grandmother and your brother, and this was
Yes.
way before that when you were kids. And your brother
Yes.
refers back to that experience as the eye.
Yes, that's correct. With our grandmother, that was when we were 13. They were living in a very large house in Middlesex, Felton, Middlesex. And one sunny afternoon, evening, I can't remember if it was afternoon or evening, it was close to one or the other. But it was very light and there was a light breeze. And my brother and I were out in the back garden with our grandmother, and the house was 3 stories high. So it was quite a big, quite high house. And there's a reason why I'm saying this. So we clocked this silver orb sphere thing that was moving across the clear blue sky. And we thought at first that it was a balloon. But on closer inspection, we found that the object was moving quite quickly and with seeming purpose. The next thing that happened was that it came over one of the trees at the back of the garden. And as we marveled at it, it came over our grandmother's head, or quite high up. You couldn't reach up to touch it, it was too high. But we were fascinated because it made no sound. There were no markings. It just hung there. It looked heavy, but it defied everything that we could understand. And yet our grandmother strangely appeared quite relaxed about the whole thing. Thinking back to it now, it seems very bizarre. But there again, the situation was. And then, of course, we wanted to have a closer look at it, and Grandma was going to go and get a pair of binoculars so we could really focus on it, really close up, having it be in your eye. But as soon as she was about to move, it went off, and we said to her, what was that? And she said it was the fairies. They come to take a closer look at us. Those were her words. And we saw it move up to the first floor of the bedroom windows, and it seemed to go up, so it was looking through the window. Then it went over the house, and we ran into the house and through to the front of my grandparents' front bedroom on the first floor, and we saw it disappearing. And I remembered hearing my grandmother speaking on the phone because they had a hall and the stairwell went in a huge arc, and we used to have the top room. I remembered opening the door and listening, and she was talking to a family member about what had happened. And I remembered then it hit me really hard because grown-ups didn't talk about this thing. And I found out years later that my Uncle Bob, who was the biggest skeptic of all, when they moved to Caister, him and his wife, my Auntie Betty, he'd actually told us, Caister, that he'd seen, when he was taking a dog for a walk, he'd seen a huge cigar-shaped UFO coming out of the ocean and all of these smaller crafts going into it. He ran home, they thought he was having a heart attack. And I had to still myself because there was this man who was always negating everything, telling me and my brother about this huge UFO that he'd seen. And there had been a few other experiences with family members, but not many. So that was the first, the main one that defied all forms of understanding. And it was that point, I think, when we became more interested, because the school that we went to, Stockwood High School in Luton, being as we came back from South Africa and lived in Luton, there was a wonderful teacher called Mr. Charles, a pipe smoking teacher, and he lent us the whole volumes of his paranormal magazines. I can't remember what they were called then. We were told by another teacher, Miss Horton, that we had to make sure we looked after those magazines. And my brother and I relished them. So that's when it really, really started. But 1989 was the turning point, I think, in all of this.
Yeah. And is your twin, does he have the same abilities as you, able to do the psychic reading?
No, he's very artistic. He's an artist, and if I may, say without boasting, he's a brilliant artist. He seems to have advanced in his artistry, and he's also an author. And he is a little bit psychic, but not that much. But I think he's more than he says. But I always say to people, we're all psychic. If you have a brain, it's a facilitator for consciousness. End of. It's how you utilize
We
it.
all have the ability to tune within.
We have.
Yeah. I mean, look, if we're a soul having a body, we've all got that ability. But some, maybe, if they've done it for a lot longer in other lifetimes, maybe are more open to it in this one. That's why you just practiced it before. Or maybe it's just something on the tape, or something that was just something that you chose to open at a deeper level, even right now. Then there was no past lives, and just right now, this is the choice that you've made, and we choose, and maybe the experiences that we're going to talk about, the experience, the 1989 experience that we're going to discuss now, was part of that opening for you, which I think you do feel.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and that was. I recalled it. I can remember it very well. All the experience very well. There may have been a gap where I can't remember. I can't remember one part. But what happened was that during those times when I was 20, I didn't drive. I couldn't drive. We lived in a village, Marston Mortain, which is about 5 miles outside of Bedfordshire. It was a small village then. It's grown now. We lived in a small cul-de-sac, and I used to get the train from there to Millbrook, a rickety old train station. It wasn't even a train station, it was more like a shack, and it took you into Bedford. On this particular night, I came back. I never made a record, although I know it was in winter of 1989. I never made a record of the event. I do with everything else now. But it was winter, and I'd walked the mile or so back from the train station, which got me in the front door for about 7:15. And our house was on a corner, and it had frosted glass windows to the front of the property. So, the doors were all frosted glass. You went through a hall to a kitchen, and that's where I went. And downstairs was my brother and I shared a study stroke bedroom. It was a huge room with a shower room by it. And then you had the living room and the kitchen and the conservatory. And then you went upstairs to 3 other bedrooms and a bathroom. So I walked through the hall and I went into the kitchen, and the frosted glass doors to the kitchen, left it open, leaned myself against the side, had a drink. My brother was in front of me, but he was in the dining area, so that where I could see out to the hall, he was in the kitchen, but further back in the same room. So he was staring, looking at me, and the dog was to my front, in front of the kitchen bar, and my sister was to my far left. It was only the 3 of us and our dog in there, Benji. And what had happened was that I can't remember what we were talking about. It could have been just normal stuff, just wanted a coffee, let my hair down a bit. And suddenly the atmosphere started to change. It felt electrified. And I won't go into too much detail, but literally my brother seemed to stiffen and the dog started to growl. And he lifted his head up to the ceiling. And I thought, what the hell's wrong with him? What was he doing? And he said, there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die. Well, there was certainly no earthquake, and grandma, our maternal grandmother, was still very much alive at this point. The dog started to growl more. My brother was frozen, but everything happened very quickly at this point. While he was suspended, frozen, looking up at the ceiling, he'd said what he said, there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die. The dog started to growl and get louder, and there was this electrical current seemed to increase, and then this light came to the front up the driveway, and I thought that my mum had finished work early and was coming back because she worked nights. But I was confused because I'm like, there's a car coming up the drive, the light's coming towards the frosted glass windows. The next thing that I know is that light has intensified, and the front door, where the glass, it was like jelly moving backwards and forwards. The dog started to really bark loudly. My brother didn't move. I didn't look to see what my sister was doing, although it's possible that perhaps she was also frozen, as it were, like my brother, suspended. I can't prove that because I didn't see her. I knew she was over there. But then all of a sudden, this small being, about 3 foot tall, clad all in black, very diminutive, with a large, what I can only describe as a motorcycle helmet on its head. It looked like a helmet, a visor of some sort, came through the door, came through as though the glass had become pliable, like jelly, or I don't know how to explain it. And then I'm looking at it. My mind is trying to register what I'm seeing as well as hearing the dog really barking. And then the thing came through and dashed in forward, which went into our study stroke bedroom and study. And the door returned to normal. My brother seemed to come out of the trance. The dog was still barking. And my sister seemed to be there, although I hadn't taken note because she was to my far left by the conservatory. And I said, there's an intruder in the house. And the fear, or the trying to translate what happened, which registered but couldn't register, because I'm like, well, how can that happen? It can't happen. It's impossible. And I shouted, there's an intruder in the house. And I took from behind me a big knife from the drawer. And the next thing that I saw was this little figure running that made no sound across the hall now and up the stairs, which are blocked by the wall of the kitchen. The stairs was right to my right, and it disappeared. And we had to calm the dog down, and we searched the house and we found nothing. I couldn't understand what had happened. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. It did scare the crap out of me. And I remembered I broke down because I couldn't understand it. It just didn't make any sense. I couldn't work it out. The next part, because there are 3 parts to this, the next part that happened, the part that I'm ashamed of, which was very hard for me to understand. So we had the physical part that happened. The part that I felt was not physical, yet I was conscious throughout the ordeal, was that in the early hours of the morning, I found myself on my back, laying on my back, hovering 3 feet from the floor. I awake in the hall, and just by the door of where this thing came through, and my head is forward, so I'm being slowly pulled as though something has a hold of me, and I can't move my arms or my legs. And I know people have said you've had sleep paralysis. That may be the case, but let me just continue. So as I'm going forward, I can't move. I'm thinking, what the hell has happened? You've woken up and now you find yourself outside your bedroom, stroke study, and you're being pulled on your back, immobilized by someone for unseen energy. And I'm going through the kitchen frosted glass doors. It has everything to do with glass and doors. So I'm going through it like a knife going through butter. And I'm thinking, how the hell am I able to do that? I can see the dog sleeping in his corner, and I'm being guided around the kitchen, through the kitchen door. I go through the kitchen door, and I'm thinking, I need to get out of here because, and then I'm being pulled through the conservatory glass doors, and then I find myself outside and being twisted around, and I'm looking up, and I can see all these UFOs, and I'm still hovering 3 feet off the ground. I can't move, but I'm looking up thinking they're real because I can see all these UFOs moving. They're real. The realization at that point was like, people are stupid because there they are. They're here. There was one object that wasn't moving. It was dark, but spherical and dark gray. As soon as I clocked it, it seemed bigger. As soon as I clocked it, I felt this whoosh, and I was moving towards it, and then cut out, blanked. And the next part is the part that the publishers wanted me to admit, because even they couldn't get their heads around it, and they felt that it was embarrassing in nature. I then awoke confused, and again, I couldn't move. I seemed to be laid on some type of, if I use the word metallic bed, that's the only way I can explain it. I couldn't tell if it was plastic or metallic. I didn't give myself a chance to feel the stuff around me at that point because I found myself laying naked on this bed. I was no clothes on, and it was very hot, like being in a sauna. But I could see that there was kind of like an opening to the front of me. It kind of like seemed to be a little bit hidden because where the wall ended and there seemed, or I felt there was another opening was there. However, the next thing I realized was that when I turned to my right, I could see these 3 tall reptilians. They seemed dark and tall. They were covered in more of a thicker mist than the stuff going around the room, but they were moving backwards and forwards. And then immediately I felt something in my stomach, my lower abdomen, that felt organic. And the horror at that point then of realizing that when I tried to get up, because I couldn't, because I was restrained here, and my legs and arms, was that they had something inserted into the lower abdominal region, and it was inside the bowel or the stomach. I couldn't tell if it was the bowel or the stomach, but it felt organic, like it was doing something in there. And at that point, I screamed. I just screamed and I screamed, and the 3 beings that were observing had no empathy, no understanding, nothing. You were just a piece of meat. And it was the most terrifying experience of finding yourself waking up to this kind of experience that you can't explain. Well, every time I yelled, my voice hurt because I wanted them to get that thing out. I wanted it out of me. I did not want it in there. I had no understanding of why it was there or what they were doing. Some people have said it's a bit like rape. Well, I understand that, but this some type of forcible experiment that I have no idea what's going on. So immediately when I finished yelling, I immediately can see this gray, but it's more of a creamy gray than the normal gray color that people see. And it came forward, it marched forward, and the clamps were released. This thing was released. I felt it being released. And I felt empathy towards it because I felt that it was my savior, although it's probably working with the other guys. but at least the horror had stopped. And it ordered me to dress. It didn't speak. It felt more like I knew or understood what it was saying. Dress. So I dressed, and I followed it forward to where I could see the light. The other things had gone. I didn't know where they'd gone. I wanted out. I wanted to get out. So this thing moved me towards this through this corridor, towards this what I thought was a wall, and I could see these little lights above the tops of the ceiling that was casting this haze all over the place. And immediately I had in my mind the image of a tree. I don't know whether or not the grey put that in my mind. I have no idea what the tree meant. It seemed big and old, as though it had some kind of meaning to it. I don't know. I just wanted to get out. So the door opened. It was a door, and it showed the village from a height. And I could see that it was very early morning. But the worst thing of all was that when I looked out, there was another craft, and this is where it gets really cranky, but I don't think so later on through understanding this. There was another craft, smaller, that was hovering above the conservatory. So this thing's ordering me to get out. I'm being a bit of a wuss because I've been through this situation. I don't understand what's going on. I can't understand what this thing is. And it tells me to get out, to leave. And I'm thinking, I can't get it. We're at a height. And the next thing I knew was that there were two greys that I was ordered for some strange reason, God knows why, not to look at, that accompanied me down from there, floated, if you will. It's all to do with floating and solid objects again. And I was met with the last part of the experience. And the two greys beside me had gone. I didn't look back. I was never to look back. That was the strange thing about it. And there was this other grey in front of me, standing underneath this smaller sphere. And this is the real part that fascinated me afterwards. He seemed more human, but he had a more pronounced chin. He looked a little bit more well-built than the one I'd just seen. It was wearing a one-piece uniform with khaki uniform with knee-length boots. It had this stupid, tall, pointed hat on its head that seemed to just touch the underneath of the craft. But his arms were folded like this, and he had this scowl on his face. He had black, almond-shaped eyes, a very small, if I could use the word, just a pronounced nose, and a slit for a mouth. But he had his arms folded, and he was seething. And I'm looking at him thinking, you're angry with me? You're angry with me? And I'm like really upset because I'm like, you've just done this to me. I have no understanding why you're angry with me. There was no communication from him to me, none. But I thought I need to ask him something. I need to ask him something. I need it. And I thought, well, how on earth are you able to get someone through locked and bolted doors? How is that possible? And I knew that if he could give me the answer, I could tell people and they would believe me. But as soon as I asked that question to him, he looked stunned. He opened his mouth in an O, and he started to raise his head to the underneath of his craft like that. And he started to rasp in what I can only determine was unintelligible language. It reminded me of the old ZX81 voice synthesizer that my brother and I had. And the next thing that I knew was I came crashing through the conservatory glass doors, the kitchen glass doors, the bedroom door, and bang, I woke up immediately. I had a nosebleed, had to go and sort myself out. And after the experience, I found 3 triangular marks behind the right ear. There were 3 marks in a straight line, not triangular line, on the right arm. I suffered continuous embarrassing nosebleeds to the right nostril. The doctors were going to cauterize it, but they stopped after 2 years. And I found it difficult to walk. And interestingly, after many, many years after that, I found I had problems with my right ear. And on 3 occasions, I'd gone to the doctors. On the 3rd occasion was quite revealing. As of yet, I haven't had the, whatever it is, examined properly by an ear specialist. People have said, well, why haven't you done that? Well, put yourself in my shoes. Do I want to keep it in there? Maybe I do. I have no idea. But I'd gone to see the doctors on the third occasion because I was fed up with this, because I felt it move, whatever it was, in the right ear. And we're talking many years later, many years later. And I forgot to say, I'm sorry, my brother tried to take the picture of the 3 triangular marks behind the right ear with an old Polaroid instant developing camera. Nothing came out, nothing. No matter how many times we pressed that thing, about 3 or 4 times, I think there were about 3 or 4 films left in the camera, nothing came out. So we gave up on that. But there again, what was I to do? Go to the doctor and say, "Doctor, I've been raped by aliens." You know, it's just not the done thing. But what was interesting was that just recently, Pierre Sebac, the researcher and author, had stated that what the last alien that I call Noddy, so I've got to have a name for him, Noddy was doing, was that he was mimicking what my brother had done when my brother had gone in his trance and spoke in unintelligent language. And Noddy seemed to be doing the same, or replicating what Ronnie had done. So this is where we've got to think outside the box. And the question again of how I was taken, but also had received the physical marks, as many other abductees experience. So we can see that there are 2 parts to the phenomena. One appears to operate on a seemingly physical level, and the other is on a astral level of and then personal conscious connection link on this level, individual level. That's why some people have different experiences, but there's a pattern towards what happens to them. So that was the embarrassing and very difficult experience that I'd gone through. And you can now understand why I had been the butt end of jokes with this. And when you're being honest, and I can still remember, Kevin, the event as though it happened yesterday. Yesterday. You know, we're talking about, what are we, 31 years ago? And I can still see and remember everything as clearly as it happened yesterday.
So when you woke up in the bed?
Yes, I awoke immediately in the bed.
And the astral part of this experience, you feel, was that particular part of this part of the abduction and whatever procedure this was. You think that was astral, or you would also be happy to say, well, maybe it wasn't?
No, I believe that they were extracting the soul. I believe that they had a process of extracting the real part of you into their reality. And this is when, in 1996, that the penny dropped, when this download came. And unfortunately, through time, a lot of other people, they can take or pick snippets of what you've written about and take it for themselves. That's fine. I understand that. But the theory of this soul this maybe you, as you said, I've heard this before, that you had to go through the experience in order to put a piece to the puzzle together in order to get you from A to B to C. I would rather have hoped that the experience had been that traumatic. But there again, when someone goes through a traumatic experience, they changed, and normally for the better. But why it happened, I still have no idea. I don't know who Noddy was. Excuse the pun. He's not. I know he's Enid Blyton's creation, but if you've seen animated plastic move, that's quite frightening. And the experience of going through that was raw. And I mean raw. People laugh or joke, or oh, what a load of rubbish. But when you are presented in a situation that you have no control over, and you also find that in that situation that something is happening to you that you also have no idea what that is, that opens up a barrage of something else that's very raw. You'll have people and psychologists trying to tear you to pieces and saying it's this and it's that. No, there were physical marks. And it wasn't the only time that some form of integration had occurred. There may have been another episode, but I cannot remember what happened. And I will.
Yeah.
Yes, many years later, yes. No, but the situation that led to that was extremely bizarre. And, I hopefully other people see me as a man of my word. But, how can you be believed when you bring out a story like this, or an experience? You're judged and analyzed in every way possible. I can only report what happened.
Would you
So
be
that
shocked that maybe it wasn't an astral kind of pull? You know, it wasn't an astral sort of experience in a sense. It actually was a real experience, but it's just your way of trying to make sense of it, calling it astral.
whatever would be explained or how it could be explained, I am open to all forms of suggestion. I am in no way saying that this was an alien abduction, but we find that other people have had these experiences and they have placed them within that category. So it's the only way that I can measure that experience by stating that I had an alien abduction. It could have been something entirely different, like many other abductions we don't know. And that's something that we are working and striving towards understanding on a deeper level of reality, as it
Would
were.
you ever be able to take away the word rape and say, what if they were actually healing some within your intestines or something? Whether there was something there that was
There,
needed
yes,
removing.
there is also that. Yes, it's almost like Travis Walton when he was struck, and he believes that what happened was that, as you many other researchers now know, is that he had probably got in the way and was dead, and they brought him back to revive him. So maybe our understanding is twisted and round the wrong way. I totally get that. But I think when you've been through an experience like that, you can't help but feel the anger and the hurt and the pain. But at the same token, you grow and develop. And someone asked me recently, how do you feel about it? And I said, well, I can now feel blessed because if this experience was something that was meant to happen on a spiritual level, and if it's brought me to this point in time now, then I am blessed because of it. I survived the journey. Although we may not understand the full implications of why it happened or the process involved, we have to think again outside the box. So I totally agree with you, Kevin,
I
on
mean,
that
were there any
one.
sort of health issues that you felt in the stomach area at the time, or
I've there had been some health issues I don't want to go into here, but and also I has suffered with health in later life. So yes, I that is a possibility.
did you feel any connection to them as though that you knew them from something else, but you just couldn't explain it, you couldn't put your finger on it?
No, no, no. But the actions of Noddy that Pierce Back brought forward and replicating what my brother had done astounded me. And Pierre has suggested that perhaps that on their reality, they were scrambling the language through my brother and perhaps even my sister to knock them out. They didn't knock the dog out. The dog did die of a brain tumor not long afterwards. We lost our dog to a brain tumor. But I will tell you that it is fascinating within its content, but you have to be very careful because I in no way intended for this to get out. And certainly I'm not a sensational seeker. People then say to you, well, you write books. Well, how else are you to express yourself through knowledge and sharing that? And contrary to popular belief, as researchers, we scrape the barrel. We get very little money. And I don't think or believe that I would be trudging along this path on the base of a lie. I believe that it's interesting. But as I said to you before, Kevin, I'm not interested in that now. Although it happened, I'm more interested in why the whys and who they are. I think that's fascinating. The other thing with Noddy is that I seem to recognize him. I failed to mention, I have mentioned it before, but it felt like I knew him from somewhere, quite where I couldn't remember. I couldn't recall. I don't know. It just seemed old, or he seemed old, and but very angry. I mean, his face was a picture. I have no idea. I could never work that out why he was so infuriated with me. And I felt that somehow I had failed them in some way with whatever they were doing up there on that so called craft. I have no
Well, maybe
idea.
they were trying to help
It's
you, and maybe you stopped the procedure, and with free will, they stopped it for you. Who
uh,
knows? If you've still got the ongoing health problems now, I don't know. I mean, I'm just
well, their health issues, sorry, have changed somewhat now. So maybe they could or may have averted more of a problem that had been occurring when I was younger.
yeah. I mean, and what soul lineage connection you got to them, and all this kind of things that people talk about. Who knows, right? That's unknown at this place. But or unless you want to answer that.
Well, as I say, when you get to the meat of it, it seems to fall apart. As I said before, being a researcher and an author, it doesn't put you in good light when you yourself have had an experience because you tend to be biased. But, my fueling, my energy, my attention has been to find the truth and what these things are. And that's something we're still looking for and we haven't yet found. We can only base our assumptions upon speculation and theoretical models or arguments, healthy arguments, of course.
Did you share the probing with your brother straight after when they were, or at the period when you took the pictures? Obviously, you must have shared your experience, but did you share the full experience?
You mean about the abduction?
About the probing. Obviously you've got this.
Oh yes, yeah. Because my brother and I are very, very close, and we confide in each other. The most embarrassing part were the nosebleeds. I mean, that was something that was awful. I mean, literally, I would be on the train, and it would just start, and nothing could stop it for ages. And yeah, and I mean, I don't remember them sticking anything up my nostril or in my ear or in my arm, but I think in the gap or the missing time that seemed to have occurred when I just reached the craft and a blackout occurred, it is possible that more had been done. But again, there is no way of proving that because I have no recall of that. But I assume that's possible or something else had been taking place at that point.
And your brother and your sister that on the first sort of incident, they don't remember any sort of frozen or missing time. For them, it was just instantaneously,
Yes.
There was no pausing of any sort of, no.
No, that's
Right,
correct.
okay.
Yes. Interesting, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And have you come across other experiences that, or people that have gone through the same thing, at all, in the sense with the same sort of experiences that you went through with the probing?
There have been a few, but they remained private because they have been people that connected with me at some conferences and wanted to talk in privacy. That is very much evident because I understand that it's a delicate nature, but unfortunately, when you come forward with your truth, you suffer for it, you see. And this is something that you have to deal with because it was very raw, and I don't think people can understand that. As being an observer to an event, it's different until you're actually in it.
What did they find in your ear? What did the doctor find in your ear that you think is still there?
The last examination that took place, there were two doctors involved. I'd gone over there, and the first doctor was using her device to look in and look in and look in, and I was becoming worried because she said, "Hold on, I need to get another doctor." So she went off to get this other female doctor. They were both female doctors, and they don't know anything about my UFO stuff. They know about the psychic stuff, but not the UFO stuff. And the other doctor looked in, and she said, "Well, it looks like it's got a crystalline structure to it, and it looks like it's still healing." And I became alarmed, thinking, "My God, what is she talking about?" What was even more bizarre is that she left it at that. She went back up to her office, and the other doctor that I was with turned to me and just said, "Have you been abducted by aliens?" And I thought, well, I was shocked and laughed because what else are you going to do? And I got up and I said there was no more said about it. I went back to the car file where someone went in. But I did think about this. And another researcher, Paul Sinclair, a brilliant researcher in England, author of the Truth Proof series, has said that I can get my medical records for about a tenner, and I may just do that. But do I want the thing taken out? That's the question. And I'm like, well, obviously, that was assigned to me to say, leave it, just leave it. People will say that's a cop-out. To be honest with you, I don't care what they think or say. It's me, it's my body. And if we've still seen them, as we had the last observation of them had been on the 9th of April, 2016 at 11:15 at night, they presented themselves in spectacular fashion, the UFOs that were, three of them, and that were heading on their way from Marston Mortain to where we moved to in Kempston in Bedfordshire. And that was the last time. It was incredible. It was witnessed by other people. My niece filmed them. They've been analyzed. Obviously, they're in the book. And but it didn't make the press. With other, I thought this would be in the papers. I wasn't going to report it to them because I've had enough ridicule from the press anyway. But it didn't. And the very next night, earlier on, a helicopter came over the house very low and did some very strange maneuvers that I thought was very funny. I'm no conspiracy here. It was not a military helicopter. It looked more like a police helicopter, although I couldn't see any police markings on it. We could see the pilots very clearly, probably to mix up the times for other people. Coming forward and saying, "Did you see those 3 huge UFOs, spherical UFOs coming over?" You mean the helicopter? Oh, yes. People get confused, you see, through the passage of time. And if you don't record things, then they will get confused. So I understood that.
Okay, that's the hard part for me to swallow, is that the nurse saying that to you.
That's exactly what she said to me. They were her exact words.
Yeah. But could you understand why that would be hard for me?
Yes, absolutely. And I totally concur. But, that is exactly what she said. Those were her exact words. Have you been abducted by aliens? And I laughed. That was it. And ordinarily, someone would say to you, if you had a problem with the ear, you need to go to the hospital. You need an ear specialist to have a look at this. But they didn't. It was almost like automated.
And do you think it's possible that she recognized you, or someone in there recognized you from that was into that subject, and you had been known locally?
I don't think so. I don't know. The whole situation was bizarre. But there again, isn't it all? I mean, and people, that's one of the things that people find more incredulous to believe. And I'm like, that happened.
Could she have been under some sort of spell to say that, in a sense, by something that was beyond you, so that it would put a dent in your story, in a sense, or it would.
That is interesting. I haven't really thought about that. There is believing in the unbelievable, experiencing the unbelievable, but then trying to make things fit. But we have to be theoretical. It is possible. There have been cases where, certain abductees, as they're called, have been, controlled under the influence of another intelligence. That has been proven. Even Terry Lovelace went through that experience on board the ship. When he was able to recall the memories, he was being controlled. And all this thing also, my brother had been controlled by some unknown force, by the words that he spoke that made no sense to me. And then it's coming through the mouth of a doctor. This is weird.
How do you trace that doctor down? I wonder if she would have remembered saying that to you, even on that day, let alone nowadays.
Well, saying that, the doctor's surgery has now changed hands. In Cater Street Surgery, it's changed hands, and the doctors have changed. So we are now with another doctor that's further afield, because they had a big readjustment. I think, was it about less than a year ago, I think. So, but I would still remember and recognize the nurse stroke doctor nurse, most definitely. Oh, yes.
It makes you think, doesn't it? If this is a simulation, can it do things sometimes that try to put you off?
Well, if Kevin, that they can alter time, if they can freeze time, and when we saw the UFOs on the 9th of April 2016, they were there exactly 11:15 at night. It was a clear night. When I got out my car with my brother to view them, do you know what? There was no one walking in their dog. There was no one coming down from the pub. There was no one. The sound was nothing. The sound was like, when it's just snowed and there is a silence. That is what was there. We didn't lose any time because I kept a track of time. There was no time loss, but it was as if time had frozen. Let me tell you, we don't live on a busy street, but it's quite, it's people walking around all the time. Whatever time of the hour, there was no one.
I had, my whole family had a UFO experience, and it was the same thing. The missing, the frozen time that happened. But, for me to try to explain what we all saw, no one's ever going to believe me, because only we saw it as a family, and they're just not going to believe it, because to see it is to know that there's something else. Or is it just that? Is it? I think it's a game changer in your reality, but not enough for me to be in awe by all the time. Absolutely not. But I know what my eyes saw. You know what I mean? But to try to understand what my
Mm,
eyes were seeing, no idea. No
yes.
idea.
And it's also a case of what you are experiencing. From our vantage point, I can only report exactly what happened. I've had people try and trip me up. Once one of them said, "You mean the sphere that you saw with your grandmother, the size of a tennis ball?" No, it was the size of a football. And I get tired of it. And I think, to be honest with you, that's why I retracted by a lot of my own experiences, because I'm thinking, well, I have had the experiences. I don't need to prove myself to anyone. What I need to do is to work out what we are dealing with and why it's happening. And also, on top of that, the added injury to insult to injury is that we live in a system that is still in denial about this. That is the thing that hurts. And if they do know more than we know, what do they know? Why can't they share the information? Is it really that dreadful? And I think on some levels it could be, or it's something that we will find very hard to accept because of the limited programming that they have delivered to every single human being on this planet. We're not allowed to talk about our past. We're not allowed to talk about life on other planets. And if we do, it's too far away that we can't reach it. And it goes on. So, sometimes it gets tiresome. But, at the end of the day, you're right, Kevin. You're absolutely right. And I believe you when you say that it's a personal journey of the soul. And, and I like that because it makes perfect sense to me. And, we can't try and bring someone else into the equation to make that fit into that person's life because we are different souls. We have different lives and different journeys. Most definitely, as we discussed previously with the souls, the question of life after death and the other side, and of course, past, present, and future lives, even those on the other side. So it is very interesting. But I think that when we're dealing with the UFO phenomenon, we're dealing with a larger, you know, can of worms here that when you open, it just spills out everywhere and you don't know where to look first of all. And this is why sometimes it can override the human senses. There was a part of me that did reject openly a lot of the UFO phenomena when I belonged to UFO group for many years. And this was the group that got me connected with television because they wanted stories. And I didn't realize that they were so derogative, some of them. But anyway, not all of them. Some of them were really good, but they were edited. I guess that's a good thing for TV, especially when you mention the military, but there we are. But I think, with a lot of this, I never really wanted to accept it. But the more I studied it, the more there was an acceptance within the psyche or an understanding. So I can understand how some people who are programmed like we all are will openly reject it because it's just too damn confusing and it will override their sense of reality. I understand that. I get that. Truly, I
Well,
do.
yeah, and people have other problems, don't they? I mean, this type of UFO experience isn't gonna, change their lives in some respects with the pain that they're going through. Do you know what I mean on
No,
their earthly
no.
journey? But it is there if you do want to look at it, and I wonder why. I guess it's like anything, isn't it? There's many ways to the same place sometimes, isn't there? Many ways to the same destination.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is
All streams lead to the same ocean
yeah.
eventually. Agreed,
N-
most
No,
definitely.
you didn't
Yes.
have any regression with this experience, no?
No, there was a guy. I used to have recurring dreams of these stones and a broken tower in the middle. And I realized that this was linked with an old place that we were connected with when we were children, Bignell House, that belonged to Dr. Thomas Gregor and his wife Marge in Bicester, Oxfordshire. And he was a eye surgeon, a brilliant eye surgeon. And we were tenants on the property with the servants' quarters. The place was haunted. We had no money. My mother used to clean the mansion, and they were a very good family that looked after us. But I think some things happened there. And he tried to regress me with regards to these stone circles. When I drew them and showed them to my mother, she knew exactly where it was on the property. but I can't. I think I'm just too hard to hypnotize or regress. I think I've got quite a strong mind. Not that strong for an alternative force to come in and knock you out, but certainly on this level, I felt uncomfortable because it felt like that it was me that was generating the images that he wanted me to see. And I'm like, I can't do this. I want to keep the experience as it was. I don't want it soiled in any way.
That is the problem with regression sometimes. You think to yourself, how much am I adding to the plate? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Kathleen Marden and many others are doing brilliant jobs because they are professionals. They're true professionals. They know what they're doing. But the person I had was kind of like
maybe
on
one
that
day.
level.
Let's put that as maybe a one day thing. Do you know what I mean? That you might have that with the right person. Let me just add that. So, yeah, wow. Where do you see yourself wanting to go with what you're doing with your life right now? Is it just really you want to just flow a little bit, or do you have plans?
I want to explore and research and about the UFO phenomenon. I finished a book. I brought it out. My brother and I lost our other two publishers, Pegasus Books and Kapelbaum, because both the publishers passed over. But I brought one out called Guardians of the Dead, which dealt specifically with the process of discarnate communication to show people how we theoretically assume it works and not the jargon. Or the stuff that people say, like wispy stuff on a more. I'm not a scientist, but on a technical level. And then I brought out, obviously, You, the Public Deceived. Philip Mental's brought that out through Flying Disc Press. I'm working on a new UFO book, and I've got plans to write many others. But I think that my soul or my part of my being wants to find my truths. And it is fascinating. I love music, soundtracks, any powerful music that seems to emanate through the vibrations of the soul. I love my films and my books, and I just want the truth. I just feel that we are on a testing ground, and it's interesting what you asked. What are you looking for? And to answer that question, I'm not really sure. Probably a large aspect of what I am and what I represent on a soul level that I haven't yet worked out. But I think it's fascinating, and I believe it's wonderful, with many other wonderful minds, esteemed minds that we're connected with, and the journey going forward, and people like yourself as well, who are also interested in all of this, that bring people together to talk and discuss and to get it off their chest. I think it's very important because it's a process of healing as well. I feel that anyway.
Yeah, aren't we always going through that process, aren't we? Absolutely. So, your most important message, would you say, of the body of work that you've put out there so far?
Well, that, if you have an experience and it is true to you, then believing that and, find your truths, find the holy grail of your existence, find that deep within, and know that life isn't all bad. You can go through some terrible times, but we learn and evolve through those passages of what I call eternity.
Absolutely. Well, Philip, I just want to say thank you for this over 2 hours that you've given us right now, because I know it's late your end, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that your time with us. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the interview, and thank you for understanding the most personal aspect of the experience. I really appreciate that, and I really value your time as well, Kevin. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It's been wonderful.